very obvious. To Catch a Thief looks to me like a project that Hitchcock did as almost like a vacation.
Yeah.
Opportunity to go travel to France,
France and
hang out with beautiful people, and but it's loaded with dialogue. And this is another thing I guess we could talk about is uh, uh, Hitchcock started in silent films, and for the silent filmmakers, the great accomplishment was to tell the story without using too much dialogue.
Right.
Because back then, the only way you could do dialogue would be to have it printed
Well,
on a
yeah.
card. And obviously, people don't want to go to a movie and see, half the picture, text on the
Reading it,
screen.
yeah.
So it became a point of pride. If you could make a movie that had a minimal amount of those type of titles, you had learned how to tell a story cinematically. And this is something that we hear nowadays all the time as well, that you should
Show, don't tell.
show, don't tell, right? But coming from that background, it gave him a prejudice against the importance of sound. Once you do have sound, and once you've gone through that period, which they had to go through, where sound recording made it sort of inhibited the shooting of the movies because the cameras were bulky and there was all sorts of problems with recording. And for a time there in the early sound era, the filmmaking techniques sort of reverted to the most primitive because they had no choice. It was the only way to shoot sound films. But very quickly, they learned how to make very sophisticated films with a lot of different angles and a lot of different special effects that were also sound movies. And as proof of that, 1933, which is just a few years after the first all sound movies, and like 27, 28, somewhere in there. By 1933, they were doing things like King Kong, which has just this amazing range of different types of photographic techniques and also sound effects. I mean, there's sound effects in King Kong that nobody ever heard before because they were just developing those techniques at the time. The special effects techniques that they developed and the equipment that they developed to carry those effects off were still being used in the 60s when they did Star Trek on the same lot where they did King Kong. So there wasn't any, there was a period when it was important not to forget how to tell a story visually just because you had sound. And Hitchcock was an important bridge, right, from the silent era to the sound era. He brought all those imaginative visual techniques into the sound era. But it's also true that as the process of making sound movies became easier, and as you became more flexible as a filmmaker, shooting movies in sound, this obsession about not doing things with dialogue by limiting the dialogue, this isn't, this sense of this sort of prejudice against films that are all talk. That doesn't make any sense anymore. I mean, Rear Window could be done as a radio show.
Oh yeah, one of the greatest. I mean, one of my favorite scenes is at the beginning when it's just panning over and you see his leg in a cast,
right?
And camera pans up and you see his camera and it's all destroyed. And you're like, okay, and it goes to a picture of of a car wreck. You're like, okay, so he broke his leg filming a car wreck, and then he's a reporter. We're getting all this information just by looking at.
Right.
Then there's a picture of Grace Kelly. So you're like, okay, that's obviously his girlfriend, and it just keeps going. And you're right there. You just learned everything about all the neighbors and your main character without saying a word.
And that's exactly the sort of thing that you would have done in a silent movie.
Yeah.
Right? The audience would understand just by looking at all those things. And I'm glad he did it that way in Rear Window. But all the rest of the movie is all talk.
Right? Yeah, well, yeah.
And with To Catch a Thief, it's particularly damaging, I would say, because a lot of the talk isn't particularly interesting, in my opinion. There's some dialogue there that probably could have been cut and would have been cut if it had been any one of the other Hitchcock movies.
Yeah.
In this case, in the case of To Catch a Thief, he seems to be sort of taking it easy and saying, well, we'll just enjoy ourselves.
Yeah, I just always hate, and we've talked about it before, I hate films that have too much exposition. character's got to tell the other character exactly what's going on, and they do it like too much. It's like
Right.
new character comes in, okay, we've got to catch this guy up with what's going on. And they're like, we don't need all that.
Yeah. No,
And
I
we know it
agree.
can be done without all that. You know what I'm saying? We've seen movies that do it perfectly.
Redundant dialogue is certainly a mistake, but if your dialogue is as sparkling as the dialogue in Rear Window,
Yeah.
then my feeling is the more the merrier. You know,
Oh yeah.
there's nothing, no matter how great the silent movie may be, and there were a lot of great silent movies, there's nothing that can beat hearing a terrific actor like Thelma Ritter
Yeah.
delivering some of that dialogue. There's no comparison, right? Silent movies are limited to a certain extent by the fact that they have to simplify everything so that everybody in the audience will understand what's going on using just pictures.
Yeah.
Once you get into the sound era, you can have a much more sophisticated story and much more sophisticated characters. And all of that can just be through the inflections in their voice or the things that they're saying, the suggestions, the hints that they're making in their dialogue. There's greater meaning to the film because you have the dialogue that can have all sorts of shades of meaning that you can't convey in a visual image. That I think is, it sort of makes me wonder why he insisted all through his career right up to the end that he was only interested in pure cinema. He clearly wasn't. He clearly was very interested in crafting these really delightful scripts that were
Yeah.
filled with witty dialogue. So, I mean,